This whole trip was to take us through 8 countries and 2 principalities. The trip started in London and took us to Brugge in Belgium, then on to Amsterdam for some sightseeing before heading south into Germany through Heidelburg to stop at Mannheim. Then it was further south again, down into Switzerland for a couple of days at Luzern, then eastwards through Liechtenstein to Innsbruck in Austria, and then to Vienna for a little bit of culture. Then it was down into Italy and Venice, and then further south down to Assisi, and finally down to Sorrento. On the way back north we went via the Isle of Capri and Naples to Rome. From Rome we go up to Florence for some more culture. Then it was across to France and Monaco, then stopping at Nice. And from then we head north up through the heart of France to Bonn, and finally to Paris, where we get a flight back to Australia. The first day was London to Brugge via the Channel ferry. The day started early at the Trafalgar reception centre in London, where we boarded the coach heading for Dover, where our ferry was waiting. We soon discovered what keeps these ferries going. Once we had departed, we could see the famous white cliffs of Dover. A nice way to farewell the UK. 1.5 hours later, we arrived in Calais with all the other ferries. And a little later, we were on our way by road to Brugge. We had a guided tour of the old Brugge city with photo opportunities everywhere you looked. This whole town is a World Heritage Site, and the golden age of Brugge was between the 12th and 15th centuries. We ended up at the main town square and spent some time meandering around before we headed to the hotel to get ready for dinner. A really nice start to the trip. A Thursday morning saw us travel from Brugge to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. In fact, the whole way across the Low Countries we would see lots of wind generators. We stopped at these motorway services, absolutely superbly clean and comfortable, and the food was great. And on our way to Amsterdam we passed some of the large rivers, the Lek in this case. We also noticed that there were no fences. Apparently the water channels work just fine as barriers. We reached Amsterdam just before lunch and headed for a diamond polishing demonstration at Luzern, one of the largest diamond polishers in Amsterdam. Didn't buy any though. We walked through the red light district and then we arrived at Newmarket. Here we passed a 1488 gatehouse known as the WAG or Way Station, and in a square where many houses had moved around over the centuries. We quickly learned that you went to a coffee house for joints and cafes for coffee. The canals are all very pleasant, but we found the bikes somewhat dangerous. I did find this an interesting mix of cultures. Down the waterfront, again we saw many misshapen buildings. And we took a nice cruise around the canals. After the cruise, we checked into our hotel and then we headed for a tour of a working windmill. These thatch and wooden windmills have been pumping water out for centuries. And the end of these blades can do over 100 kilometers per hour. Now the whole top section rotates so that the blades can face the wind on 64 wooden wheels. The horizontal shaft has a cogwheel with a brake, and this can go on fire, and also a lock that can hold it once it's stopped. Now this horizontal shaft drives the vertical shaft, and down the bottom of the vertical shaft is another cog that drives an Archimedes screw that can pump up to 65,000 litres of water per minute. That's not a bad effort. We had a really enjoyable visit, thanks Ton. Now afterwards we had dinner at an old way house close to this nice little canal. Today we left Amsterdam and drove south to Germany for a cruise on the Rhine and then a visit to Heidelburg before heading to our hotel in Mannheim. From Amsterdam we had a 4-hour drive down to the start of our cruise at Bobbard, and getting to Bobbard required a tight road down to the river. But the coach managed to drop us off next to the jetty and we boarded for our cruise. Nice soup and red wine for lunch, that sounds good.
Church, or the Maria Pilgrimage Church, in which we find the Black Madonna. Something like 200,000 pilgrims come to this church every year. Towering above the church and of course the town of Bornhofen, we see two of the very famous castles here in the Rhine, known better as the Hostile Brothers. The names of these castles are the Liebenstein and the Sternberg, and these castles date back to the 11th and 13th centuries.
After lunch, the weather was good enough for us to go outside. Now the Rhine is quite a busy river. It carried a lot of traffic. But there was also lots of great scenery. We were quite intrigued that they could farm on these slopes. Our relaxing cruise ended here at St. Gore, where the coach was waiting for us. Later we passed a toll house on the water that would put a chain across the river and then remove it once the toll had been paid by ships wanting to move up. When we got to Heidelburg, went for a walk, and the castle sits above the town. But there are some lovely squares. Then we walked down some of the narrow cobbled streets, but actually enjoyed getting into the quieter back streets. We came across a site where the Jewish synagogue was destroyed by the Nazis. A very sad reminder that it wasn't always this peaceful. We walked down to the river and then along the footpath up to the bridge. And there's a great view of the castle from the bridge. Today it was a drive down through Germany to our destination Luzern in Switzerland. And just after we crossed into Switzerland, we visited the Rhine Falls. As you would expect from the Swiss, this was all very well presented. Lots of opportunities to do all sorts of adventure here, either by the boats that can take you out to the rock in the middle, or by going to the lookout just above the waterline. Now this is a really good walk down and up, but at least there's a lift for the very steep section. For something a bit quieter, there's a water wheel. After booking into the hotel, we drove out to Engelberg, where it started to rain hard as we arrived there. We still went for the carriage ride. Not that we could see much. The weather looked like it was closing in, so we headed for dinner at the farm. Lots of local cheese and meat, as well as some local drinks. After which, we headed back to Luzern. Today was to be a local day around Luzern, starting with a cruise out to Stansted, and then a short bus trip, and then taking the Stansted Horn Railway up to the top of the mountain. It looked like a very wet start to the morning as we boarded the cruise, but the city looked really nice, and the scenery was spectacular. After about an hour, we arrived at Stansted. And the coach was there to take us round to the Stansted Horn Bahn. That is the railway up to the top of the mountain. This starts as a 125-year-old vernacular railway, which being Swiss ran on time. It was quite cool in the open carriage, but it got us acclimatized for when we joined the cable car. This one is the first cabrio that is an open-topped cable car in the world, so we could stand up the top or sit inside. Soon we arrived at the top. From the terminal we walked up the track to the peak, and luckily the weather had cleared a bit, so we could see the view down to the lake and to Stansstad. After some lunch in the restaurant, we headed back down. Back at Luzern, we took a walk around the old town. Now there were two nice footbridges crossing the river. The older one is called the Spear Bridge. It goes back to about the 14th century, and it's named after the chaff that was dumped off there. Today we left Luzern and headed through Liechtenstein for Innsbruck in Austria. And the scenery as we left Luzern was absolutely brilliant. Soon we approached Liechtenstein, and the palace stands above the town of Vaduz, but the whole town is so well presented and clean. You can get your passport stamped here for €3. Once we left Liechtenstein, we entered Austria as we headed for the Heidelburg Pass. And soon we arrived at the switchback. And the view got better as we climbed higher. We took a break at the top just to enjoy the views. And then we started to descend back into the valley. We arrived at Innsbruck and we took a walk around the city. This church, the Dom St. Jacob, looks very plain from the outside, but I can tell you the inside made up for it. I loved all these narrow streets. And many of the buildings were very ornate. We walked down to the river and across the bridge to take a look at these iconic buildings. The end of another great day.